In honor of Election Day just around the corner, it seems to be the perfect time to highlight the most egregious elections irregularities we see nationwide during early voting. We have a very special episode for you, so get comfortable and listen closely. Welcome to the 30th episode of the Magnifying Glass podcast. I'm your host, Alaina Moore, and making a return today as my co-host is the American Stoic. Welcome back. We have missed you.
Glad to be back.
Today is a very special episode where we will be consolidating and highlighting the worst election violations we are tracking around the country. This election has surprised me because even elected officials are starting to admit some of the issues that are happening with the election machines and election irregularities in this 2024 general election cycle. So we can go ahead and kick it off with some of the things we're seeing nationwide, and then we're going to give you a few predictions, kind of like what we did last year, as to what is going to happen in this election. A Chinese student in Michigan is facing criminal charges after illegally voting in the state. It was reported by journalist Nick Sorter that his vote will still be counted even though he's not a citizen. This unidentified 19-year-old registered to vote on Sunday and signed a document stating that he was a U.S. citizen, but no proof was required. Now, one of the other really interesting things, and this one might be my favorite, which we probably shouldn't have put it earlier in the beginning, but Dominion machines are actually preventing voters from voting, and it's unfixable. Now, that same journalist reported on October 30th over X that Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said that there is a nationwide issue with Dominion voter access terminals, preventing voters from making certain selections. According to her office, this programming issue cannot be fixed, and voters are being forced to deal with it. Check out this video.
Issues with the programming of the VAS with specifically
Yes.
from Dominion.
Mm-hmm.
Why was that only caught in the past few days, and why can't it be fixed? I saw the release with the
Yeah, this is a nationwide issue with Dominion voter access terminals in the counties that use them. And the voter access terminals, of course, not all the machines, just the ones that are accessible, have an issue with the straight party voting and a programming issue that's, again, affected the machines nationwide. And I think all of us that use Dominion machines were unhappy to learn about this during the testing period and as early voting began. So we're working with Dominion to seek accountability on that front, and also are working with our clerks to ensure voters are aware of this programming issue that will require them to ensure they are voting every section on the ballot.
Do you think it's a bigger issue in Michigan because we do allow voters to cross over in ways that a lot of other states don't?
Because we have straight party, it's not struck me as I've talked to my other colleagues in other states. They're just as upset about it as we are. So yeah, or surprised, I think. Yeah.
It's interesting that this issue is coming now, because wouldn't you think that this would be picked up during the testing period? I mean, since we're not allowed to use paper ballots, wouldn't you think that the machines that most of the country uses wouldn't be having these issues all through early voting? Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, it's not just Dominion machines, because South Carolina uses ES&S machines, and these machines are also seeming to be flipping votes from Trump to Harris. Liam, have you heard anything similar in your area?
No, Florida does a little bit differently. So we actually still use paper ballots and then not ballot marking devices. And then once you finish filling out your paper ballot, it gets fed into the machine. I've never had an issue with those. I know that there are some concerns in Florida. I'm not saying that Florida is, you should just take your eye off the ball. Mm-hmm. But compared to some of the other states in the country and some of the other issues that we're seeing with ballot marking devices, with ES&S, with Dominion, with places like in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where they're closing the polling places early just because that county switched from a Democrat county last cycle to a Republican county this cycle. Like those are big issues. So I expect Trump to win in Florida. That's not where I think that the problem is going to lie. I do think That being said, though, that having paper ballots like we do here in Florida just makes recounts easier, makes it cleaner. There's no room for error. There's no room for debate, and so you kind of want an election to be above reproach, both in the way that you conduct it, but also in the result that you're giving to the people. And so, I think that that's part of the reason that paper ballots are so good here in Florida, and obviously, I would hope that other Republican states would push for that. But no, Florida looks pretty good right now.
And I'm hearing reports right now, as of last night in South Carolina. So recently, the SEC executive director, Howard Knapp, spent $25 million on buying new tabulators. And tabulators is what you run the ballots through and what counts them. Now, mind you, the tabulators we only had for 4 years. They were purchased around 2019, 2020. They were supposed to last 10 years, but Howard Knapp decided to fork out the $25 million and go ahead and buy new tabulators for everybody. So you would think no issues, right? That we're hearing a lot of things about votes flipping, but the tabulator's not as much. Well, last night I received several reports in Richland County of Trump voters who would put their ballots in and the tabulator was not counting them.
I just don't get why people thought the transition from paper ballots to ballot marking devices was an upgrade.
Right.
Because you're basically, I've never used one, so I've seen videos on it, I've watched it. So correct me if I'm wrong, since you've actually used them. You go to the screen, you click your selections basically on like a touch screen, right?
Right.
And then it prints out a ballot that you then take to the tabulator. Is that correct?
That's correct. And yeah.
Why then do you not just fill out your own ballot? Because we have tabulators too, right? But the difference is I just fill out my own ballot, bubble in the little circle next to the name that I want, and then feed it into the tabulator myself. Two things are better here. One, in my opinion, having a paper ballot, as I said before, easy backup, easy verification that the election results were accurate. The other thing is you're just basically adding an extra step of potential error.
Right.
I know that people are going to say that there's a human error, that, maybe people will bubble in the wrong name or the wrong bubble next to the wrong name because they get confused with the spacing or whatever. And sure, we should be careful about that. But you could do the exact same thing on a ballot marking device, so I don't really think that argument clears anything up.
And then
at
least
you're also adding in the whole error of the electronic system where you don't know, you don't have this verification, and you would have to actually double check your ballot whenever you print it out. And a lot of people just aren't going to do that. There's a lot of people going through these polling places. They're usually pretty busy. There's a line. People are waiting for you. And so there's this, this rush factor where I just feel like there's more chance of human error on ballot marking devices. On top of it's harder for verification. It just seems like a mess to me, but
right. And at least with y'all's tabulators, it's reading the bubble.
Right.
Ours is reading the barcode. So not only are these ballot marking devices, when they go to hit it, it'll flip the vote from what they push. There's a lot this election where they're pushing and they believe they're pushing the right person and it says they're pushing the right person, but then it prints out several times saying that they actually voted for Harris. But mind you, the ballot marking, the tabulator does not read that part. They don't read the words that's put on there. Those words are just to make you feel better. The barcode at the top is what actually scans. So we have several versions in a red state that's not supposed to be a swing state that's showing a lot of issues. And we have 2 weeks of voting. We've got, one more week to finish out. And then we have Big Tuesday. So we'll see what happens there.
I did check, and Michigan is supposed to require ID to vote.
Yeah,
that's
what I figured. I mean, I'm hearing so much of that in Michigan and other swing states. They are not checking IDs. And, I always wonder, even if they are checking IDs, how well are they checking them?
It's like a bouncer at an 18 up strip club. They're like, yeah, we're checking it, but we're not checking it. You know what I mean? Like, if you hand us a piece of plastic that resembles an ID, then you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, hand me a phone or your name tag, and that'll work.
Yeah. Oh, here's an expired credit card. All right.
Well, more in Michigan, just to go through a little bit more of what we have. There was one voter ID with 29 separate votes already by October 30th. Now, this was uncovered by Michigan constitutional attorney Matthew DiPerno, who posted on X that after reviewing the qualified voter file of votes actually cast as of yesterday, October 29th, the database identifies 114,545 Michigan voters who have cast 279,113 ballots from multiple addresses across the state. This results in over 164,000 excess ballots as of October 29th. Below is one voter ID, and I'll go ahead and pop that up on screen for you. You can see that this one voter ID had 29 separate votes. So after this went viral on X, both Laura Trump and I believe Michigan even made a statement, but Laura Trump, who is the vice chair for the RNC, said that our election integrity team received all of these reports and immediately investigated and confirmed that it was a glitch in the system. These duplicates were not and will not be counted. I hope not, but there's a lot more where that came from.
They're trying to have their voice be extra heard in the system.
Extra heard. Oh, and to add on top of that, you can see here from Michigan's a citizens voter roll monitoring toolkit for Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. It was reported 82,647 people voted over 208,000 times. So that's 2.5 votes per person, and over 125,000 fraudulent votes. So we're seeing multiple people polling numbers, looking at these qualified voter rolls, and it's not seeming to add up. There was also a massive election scandal in Wisconsin. A federal lawsuit has been filed against the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for allegedly turning over confidential DMV data containing the, quote, personal info of millions of Americans and non-citizens for targeted voter registration and outreach efforts, end quote. This lawsuit was a federal lawsuit after discovering Wisconsin's DOT gave two nonprofits the confidential DMV data. And I believe one of those nonprofits, wasn't it Eric? We tend to hear a lot about that. Let's see. As the litigants described, the lawsuit centers around David Becker and his two nonprofits, the Electronic Registration Information Center, which is Eric, and the Center for Election Innovation and Research, which is Sierra. Sierra, however you say it, CEIR, was funded by Zuck Bucks in 2020. And
yeah, I believe that. And I think it may also have some ties to Soros as well.
Yes. Eric definitely does, which
yes.
A lot of states, including South Carolina, uses Eric still. And our SEC director says it's completely fine and they keep it up to date, even though, whatever. It doesn't. Now, the Colorado Secretary of State posted election system passwords online. I mean, can you get dumber at this point? I don't think so. The Colorado House Republicans are calling for Secretary of State Jenna Griswold to resign following a serious breach of election security protocols. Her office's recent posting of critical election systems passwords online have raised significant concerns about the accountability of our voting system. Minority Leader Pudgelis stated that her reckless disregard for professional standards and consistent lack of transparency has threatened trust in our democratic system by casting doubt in security of our election process. Her office has mailed postcards for 30,000 non-citizens, illegally encouraging them to register to vote, falsely informed other voters that they had not voted when they had, and had disclosed election system passwords on the internet.
Well, on the bright side, I'll just like to interject here. On the bright side, at least these machines can't be connected to the internet. So even if the passwords are put out online, it's not like anybody could access them remotely.
Right.
So it's really okay. It's really not a security issue. So I really don't think this story is that important.
Yeah, I don't understand why she needs to resign, because why need a password when there's no reason to connect to it?
No. And it's not connected to the internet.
Absolutely
so, I mean, you don't even really need a password.
Yeah, those modems they have in there, that's just for looks, decoration. No Wi-Fi here. Oh, and when you pull up and open your phone at a polling precinct and it says that there's Wi-Fi for the polling precinct, that's also just decoration. So don't worry about that.
Oh, yeah.
This is becoming such a widespread issue that one of our favorite people, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, opens investigations into all of these election systems. As a result of Berry County, Michigan Sheriff Dar Leaf's criminal referrals, Ken Paxton has opened a criminal investigation related to Dominion voting systems, election systems and software, which is ES&S, Hart, InterCivic, and SolarWinds. So that's really exciting. I hope something comes out of that. At least he's raising some awareness to it. Pennsylvania. Before we get into this, would you like to give us a little bit of a background of what happened in 2020 with Pennsylvania?
Well, I think most people remember there was a lot of legal cases surrounding the 2020 election. Most of them allegations of, fraud, irregularities, cheating, whatever you want to call it. But there was actually one very significant lawsuit that happened before the 2020 election actually happened in Pennsylvania, ironically enough. The state just keeps coming up because pretty much whoever wins Pennsylvania, it looks like, is going to have a very good chance at just winning it all. So Pennsylvania is a very important state, which is probably why it keeps coming up in all of these different conversations. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 2020 used COVID as an excuse to extend the mail-in ballot return deadline. And of course, they do not have constitutional authority to do that. The Constitution is very specific that only the state legislatures can make the rules regarding the election procedures within that state. And so originally, whenever the lawsuit was brought against in Pennsylvania for that, they found no standing because no harm had been committed yet. That's one of the basic principles that you need to have in order to bring a lawsuit. You need to have harm. And the lower court said that since no harm had been committed yet, aka the election had not yet occurred, so therefore this had not negatively impacted election security, then there was no case to be had. But they could bring it back after because, again, there would be harm at that point. This ran all the way up to the Supreme Court, which of course denied it. It was a 4-4 tie because they had not yet replaced the ninth judge on the court. Well, then after, in Pennsylvania, they tried to litigate this again after the election. And the courts denied it again, this time saying they didn't have standing because there was no redress of grievances, which means there might have been harm, but because the court didn't have the ability to basically have them run a whole new election in the state, we don't really know what their idea was here, what their argument was exactly, but they're basically saying that since they don't have a way to fix the harm that they have alleged was committed, therefore they have no standing. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And unfortunately, we could see this kind of play out again, where after the election, anything that we really find could be dismissed in the court system because the courts do not believe that they have a way to fix the harm that any watchdog or the RNC or whoever brings the suit is alleging was committed on or before election day, whether it was with, them shutting down polling places, whether it was with miscounting mail-in ballots, doesn't really matter. They're not going to run a new election, therefore they're going to say they're not going to have standing. And that's kind of setting up to happen again.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of stuff come out of Pennsylvania. If you thought Michigan was bad, just wait till you hear a couple of the instances that we're going to bring up real quick. One of the first things that we heard was Friday, October 25th. There was a media alert from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Suspected fraudulent voter registration forms were dropped off at the Board of Elections office in 2 batches at or near the deadline for submission. There were approximately 2,500 voter registration applications total in these 2 batches. So this raised some eyebrows and was raised to the staff's normal process to review and enter applications, so law enforcement was alerted. They had a very big press conference on it. You can see that. We'll link it in there if you would like to watch their press conference. It was also reported this week that in Pennsylvania, buses carrying non-English speaking citizens with Harris Waltz stickers reportedly bypassed Americans who had waited in line for hours to cast early votes. These individuals were guided through the voting process by a few translators, cutting ahead of others waiting in line. And you can see that video that we're playing right now where these non-English speaking citizens, as is alleged from where this video came from, And in another area of Pennsylvania, a mysterious figure with Rhode Island plates was spotted making a last-minute drop-off of a large stack of ballots. Now, another incident in a similar location, this is actually in Quakerstown, Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania cops came up in this video and said that they were cutting the early voting line at 1:45 p.m. at this location in Quakerstown, even though the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, said it had to stay open until 5 p.m. Another thing that came up around the same time, this was actually put out by RNC Director Michael Watley, saying that a supporter of President Trump was arrested today for encouraging people to stay in their early voting line and cast their ballots freely in Pennsylvania. This follows reports from across the Commonwealth that voters are being turned away in conservative areas. This voter suppression is, he says, from the left. Do not let them turn you away. You can see that video that's playing right now. So we have all of these instances. These are just a couple of very many that we're seeing coming out of Pennsylvania. And it doesn't seem like we were the only ones that were concerned over it, because Donald Trump's, for president, filed an order for special and preliminary injunction on October 30th in Bucks County, where there were also similar problems. And it was ordered and decreed by Judge Jeffrey Drager, I believe I'm saying that right, that one, defendant's actions in turning away voters who sought to apply for mail-in ballots and receive one in person before the deadline of 5 p.m. on October 29th, 2024 was violated in the Pennsylvania Election Code. And secondly, defendants shall permit any persons who wish to apply for, receive, vote, and return a mail-in ballot to appear at the Elections Bureau office and do so normal business hours before the close of business on November 1st and 24th. So as we see here, because of these issues, the judge, through this special and preliminary injunction, is extending voting, early voting or mail-in balloting, whatever you want to call it, for today and tomorrow. 2 more days extra because of these incidents.
We need it. And for those of you that are listening who maybe haven't kept up with the early voting numbers, it's not great in Pennsylvania. I think a lot of people Kamala Harris is so unlikable. You kind of fall into the 2016 Hillary Clinton trap, where it's like, well, she doesn't have a chance. And, Trump, I'll just be honest, Trump has been running a really good campaign over the last month. The garbage truck stunt
that
he
was
did
amazing
yesterday in Wisconsin was great. It's, kind of getting back to his roots in the 2016 way. So you have Trump performing at, arguably an all-time high on the campaign trail right now. And you've got an opponent who extremely unlikable, clearly unqualified, all of those things. And people kind of think like, okay, well, this election's in the bag. And I think that people need to be a little bit careful about that, because right now in Pennsylvania, well, as of Tuesday morning, the total ballots that were returned statewide, out of the 1.4 million, Democrats had 849,000 to Republicans 468,000. So it's good, but we need people to actually turn up and use these days at the early voting days or on election day. So I know that people think that, okay, this election is over because you have a great candidate versus a terrible candidate, a very likable candidate versus a very unlikable candidate, a candidate who's run a very creative and fun and engaging campaign versus a candidate who's run like a Diddy party of campaigns and just gets a bunch of A-list celebrity endorsements, goes to a Hollywood dinner right after Helene hits for a fundraiser. Clearly not somebody that's working for the people, clearly not somebody who really even understands how politics works. But because she's a Democrat, because she's a woman, because she has a D by her name, you just have to think, how many people are going to show up and vote for that? How many people are going to be excited about voting for the first female president? There's a lot of movement behind Kamala and a lot of dark money behind Kamala that I think a lot of Republicans are taking for granted and just kind of looking past, counting the victory for November 5th, marking their calendar for January 20th and the inauguration and the change of the country. But that's not going to happen unless you turn around and show up and switch the trend of these votes in Pennsylvania, because you're getting blown out of the water right now in Pennsylvania. Yes, I know it's mail-in ballots and it's early voting, and Republicans usually don't win that, but it's just not a good look right now. And especially for a state that we have put so much emphasis on. Scott Presler's done a lot of work on the ground getting voter registrations up. This is just not the turnout numbers that we needed to see at this point in the election. And so whether you're using these extra days in Bucks County to get out and vote in early, or you're going to wait for election day, it's just something you got to vote. You got to vote. You can't
And
take it for
something
granted.
that really bothers me, I mean, there's a lot of things about early voting that bothers me, but one is the reporting of it. It feels a little unconstitutional to me, at least, for them to be able to report numbers and say, yeah, this is how many voters for Republicans and for Democrats. And it's being used as a ploy by both the Democrats and the Republicans to get people out and vote. But it really makes me wonder what the actual numbers are. So, I'm hoping that we see a lot of turnout on election day. I think we're going to. I know a lot of people that are waiting for that day to happen, because we saw what happened in 2020, where you can you overwhelm the machines. Let's see what happens, because the machines are showing their issues already. Loving it.
Yeah, but I think that's also part of the reason why you have so many. I think Republicans have really embraced early voting, early in-person voting specifically, not so much the mail voting, and I think that's a good thing, because it takes away the excuse kind of if there are issues in the week-long early voting or 2-week-long early voting, depends where you are, and they don't fix them before election day. There's no excuse for that, right? But if everybody waits for election day and then there's, a huge mistake or a huge technical glitch, well, then it's a lot harder to kind of argue. I mean, obviously there's no excuse for any problems with the election. And I think it's stupid that we have all of this crap going on with it. But I think that's part of the reason that Republicans have embraced it. And like it or not, it's just kind of the way it works right now. And Republicans need to take advantage of that, and they need to make their voice heard early and often. And I know most people that I know did not vote early, did not vote by mail in 2020, and most people that I know have already voted. So I think it's a trend that is, whether it's good or bad, it's the reality of American politics in 2024, and you just kind of have to work within that system. And right now, the Republicans are just lagging behind the Democrats.
And it's very important, whatever happens in your experience. I'm glad you brought that up about it showing the issues ahead of time, because I know Brandon Newton, the guy who so-called authored our election integrity bill in South Carolina that extended early voting to 2 weeks and from 7 to 7 during the day, and even more things that we won't get into right now that are not election integrity. He went online and bragged that, oh, well, because of my bill, I was able to vote early. I think we need to be documenting everything that is happening when you go to vote. Are there problems? What problems are you having? And then report those to the county office, the state election commission. If it's bad enough, to SLED in the Attorney General's office, because they're watching as well. They're seeing all of these issues. There were ballot harvesting going on in Marion County. We're seeing all of these flippings go. Even if you're in a red state, a blue state, a swing state, whatever it is, you need to be recording what is happening. I know in South Carolina, they like to say that you can't record, but that is not against the law. Make sure that you are documenting, because we are seeing all of these issues, and it's a lot of times hard to document when you don't have physical proof. You can have your word, but maybe not the physical proof. Hey everyone, as I was editing this podcast, SLED has come out and stated that it is illegal to take a photo of your ballot according to SC Code of Law 725-100. This seems unconstitutional, as precedent has been set at the national level that pictures of ballots are protected under the First Amendment, and I also recommend looking at 725-100 because it is a very vague law. However, as of now, SLED is still making statements that it is illegal. Before we get to the end of the show, I do want to go ahead and say any predictions that we may have with this election. Personally, for me, I have a hard time with these machines thinking that Trump could win. I think he is absolutely the outright winner. He has overwhelming support. When it comes to elections day, I mean, I don't know. It would make enough sense for me to see all of these votes flipping that it would give Harris the lead.
Yeah, that's just kind of the overwhelming concern. And the frustrating point about that is that it's not something that caught us blindsided.
Yeah.
This is a problem that happened 4 years ago, and
we
if I'm
did
just
nothing.
being completely honest, Trump campaign, the RNC, state parties, all of them just dropped the ball on it. And a lot of them, if you did talk about it, kind of disparaged you And they did that for a number of reasons, one being optically, one being fundraising, all of that. A lot of the big money was not a fan of that conversation happening. But now that it's happening again, and they see the potential of losing seats, or maybe, maybe it's even a representative that is seeing this happening in their district, and all of a sudden, after 3.5 years of silence, they're like, okay, well, wait a minute, this isn't right, this shouldn't be happening, yada, yada, yada. But they were also the ones that were either A, not doing anything about it for the last 3.5 years, or even worse, they were trying to silence the people that were talking about it. I can think of one person in particular in South Carolina who's been raising this alarm bells for a long time. Anyway, yeah, as far as predictions go, unless this trend reverses in Pennsylvania, I don't see Trump winning. I think that it's going to take a lot on election day, assuming that nothing weird happens. It's still going to just take a lot, just based on the numbers that we're seeing. So I hope I'm wrong, and I hope people turn out at the end of election, in early voting here in Pennsylvania, and probably by the time this goes up, early voting will be over, and on election day. So if you're in Pennsylvania, if you're in Wisconsin, if you're in Michigan, Arizona, you got to show up. But yeah, I think that you're going to see legal challenges. This is the other thing. I think you're going to also see legal challenges dismissed.
Yeah.
In the court system for lack of standing, because there's no redress of grievances that the court thinks that they have. And then you're going to see the media say that as, oh, well, we tried all of these cases in the court system and there's no evidence of it, which is wrong, because whenever a case is dismissed based on lack of standing, there's never an evidentiary hearing, which means no evidence is ever presented, and the case is not dismissed in any way, shape, or form based on a lack of evidence. And so I think you're going to see people in the media kind of touting that line again. I think we could be heading down the same road as 2020.
I agree. And I want to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying. You said that you saw people that did nothing about it, or those that silenced others for talking about it. I'd say there's a third category there. And that is all of both Democrats and Republicans, but I put more heat on the Republicans for this after the 2020 election, for passing bills that were so-called election integrity, but instead making it worse, making us more reliant. For South Carolina, at least, the Republicans made us more reliant on the machines. They gave us more early voting. They extended absentee voting and made that more accessible. And all they did was remove drop boxes, and they called it an election integrity bill and based it off of that. That's not how it works. And I feel like those are the ones that are not only silencing, but they're making the system even worse. Keep that in mind as we continue on. If you want something to change with our elections, it starts by overwhelmingly getting out these rhinos, socialists, Marxists, whatever you want to call them, that are in our local politics, undermining the integrity of our vote. But
yeah. And you need to do that, you really need to know who your supervisor of elections is. Mm-hmm. And if they're not cooperating, or they're not respecting, kind of a safe and secure election, then you need to figure out a way to replace that supervisor of election and get somebody in there who's actually going to take their job seriously. Because, and I know this from my experience in Florida, there are a lot of supervisor of elections in what you would think of as a red state that are 100% opposed to, like, voter ID, for example, very basic things. And so, and again, it's a position that a lot of people don't know about. It's position that a lot of people do not put any pressure on. And if this is going to change, this has to start at the county level. Again, it's the way elections work. Elections are run at the county, and then they're regulated by the state. So this is not necessarily a national issue. Mm-hmm. And so people who, yes, rightfully should be, pissed at H.R. 1, which the Democrats tried to pass right after 2020 and all of that. That's terrible. But to really fix it, you're going to have to focus at the state and local level.
Yeah. And I don't want to hear complaining from anybody that is not, one, voting, and not, two, involved in unrooting some of this corruption in the county and the state level. You have no room to complain about anything. Donald Trump's not coming to save you. You have to be your own Superman when it comes to fixing your elections. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, it's plain and simple. And do research on things, because the amount of people who are generally informed but do not understand the intricacies of either the election process or the litigation surrounding even the 2020 election where you had all of these people, even on the right, saying, well, we had 50 some odd cases that were all dismissed due to lack of evidence. None of those cases ever made it to an evidentiary hearing. As I was saying, they were all dismissed for lack of standing. So none of them were found, insufficient evidence. That was never the case. And you had a lot of people on the right, generally, people who were pretty conservative, who just never either found out about that, or they did find out about it and they just didn't want to risk their sponsorship deals or whatever it was by talking about it. So you're going to have to actually probably do a little bit of digging yourself, because it's not a pretty topic. It's not as flashy as the border. It's not, as popular as the economy. So to really figure out this issue, you're probably going to have to do a little bit of legwork yourself.
Thank you for joining us today on the Magnifying Glass podcast. We delve deep, bringing the overlooked into focus and magnifying the stories that matter to you. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share, helping us shine a light on even more discoveries. I am your host, Alaina Moore, and remember, sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference. Until next time, keep looking closer.